are you?
Thanks so much. I'm doing great. Thank you for pulling this event together. It's been great to watch a lot of the content, a lot of the speakers. So thank you for having me. This is awesome.
Sure. Very excited about your talk today. You're going to be covering this new term that I actually heard from Shamir, which is FutureFi. And I love the term immediately. So you're going to be talking about what FutureFi is and what, I guess traditional finances and decentralized finances and where this is all headed. So first, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, outside of Algorand, and then how you came into Algorand. We already had somebody from Algorand yesterday, so I think we do have some idea about Algorand, but then a little bit about Algorand, and then if you got a slide deck, we'll just share it, and then we can get into your talk.
Yeah, great. So I can just pull up the cover slide here while I give my little background and my bio. Jamil, can you see the slide?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks again. My name's David Markley. I'm the Director of Business Solutions here at Algorand. As Jamil teed up, here to talk about when CeFi intersects with DeFi and becomes FutureFi. I had a little bit of a funny path into the crypto world, as many people in the space tend to come from different walks of life. Prior to joining Algorand about two and a half years ago now, I worked at a cybersecurity company called Carbon Black. I worked on the product team there for a number of years. And then prior to Carbon Black, I actually worked in energy and co-founded a hydroelectric company of all things. And so have had a kind of an interesting path on the way here, but yeah, excited to be, in the DeFi space, certainly now more than ever, and excited to, tell you a little bit more about this future vision and how Algorand's playing a role in it.
Yep, excited. So yeah, David, please jump into your presentation. You've got about 20 minutes, and then we're going to go into Q&A.
Okay, perfect. I will. I'm sure I'll get a lot of questions at the end, so I'll try and save enough time here.
Right.
But I don't think that this is a groundbreaking statement, but certainly one that's a little thought-provoking, at least to start us off. We've all heard the statistics before. The top 1% controls 50% of the wealth. The top 10 controls closer to 90. There's 1.7 billion people estimated around the world to be unbanked or underbanked. For those of us that do have access to these institutions, there's high intermediary costs with very slow transaction times. And if you're transacting through those rails, prices start to encroach on 7, 8, 9, 10%. If you use bank-to-bank systems, the average cost globally is around 11. And so I think many of us who are listening in and participating and helping build this world can attest to many of these challenges that I think we have all come to recognize. Now, with that in mind, what does DeFi really represent, and what does it mean? And just to try and expand the definition from applications that are just purposely built on blockchain technology, DeFi really represents an evolution in infrastructure, and it's poised to significantly reduce the barriers to entry for those that have historically lacked access to assets and to these financial services. DeFi, at its core, facilitates trust. As we all know, blockchains provide that as a service effectively. By using those rails, you can have transparency, you can have double spending prevention as a service. And then the interesting evolution of that infrastructure has been the redistribution of profits. We've heard over the last few days, many people talk about lending and borrowing, participating in staking pools, doing all of these facilities that have really grown up and seen a huge boom over the last 6 months. And that really, it broadens the engagement for the users that are able to now participate and help them grow their financial well-being and their financial holdings. And so, as we have all witnessed since the beginning of the year, DeFi has certainly gone through the roof. And I think we can all agree that it's no longer if DeFi is here to stay, but it's certainly in the forefront, and many institutions are starting to take a much deeper look at how they can take advantage of this low-cost infrastructure. However, DeFi is not without its own set of challenges. As we have talked about new platforms that are emerging and how to bridge assets between those, this interoperability and these complexities only continue to grow as the entire ecosystem is rapidly innovating. Think about in terms of if you issue a security token and you have your transaction restrictions implemented on chain, and then somebody wraps that token either in a centralized or decentralized model, how do you bring some of those controls to another chain? How do you translate those controls potentially into a completely different smart contract language? As many people have asked over the last few days, what is staking? What is lending and borrowing? What is yield farming? What's under the hood here? And so there's a long education curve that we need to go through just to get people understand up to speed on the basic terms. And now as enterprises try and grapple with how do I think about scalability, how do I think about interchain or intra-chain transactions, and then also how do I bridge from my existing private infrastructure that I've had regulators review that have the controls in place that I need in order to service these assets and these different asset classes, how do I map those to this new world? And so ultimately, this interface, this compatibility layer is still unclear and is really kind of the next frontier in our opinion at Algorand. However, it would be easy to turn a blind eye and say, you know what, that all sounds way too complicated. We're just going to let each ecosystem evolve and grow on their own terms. But the convergence is too important not to try and address and not to try to bring together. The centralized infrastructure, I think we can all appreciate, still retains majority of the assets and the value across the world. They have an extremely large user base. And by and large, when compared to DeFi, they have known products and services. Most people know or pretend to know what an ETF is, or will nod their heads when you start talking about T-bills or other types of financial instruments. DeFi, on the other hand, as I outlined, is this innovation in the core plumbing, which can bring massive amounts of efficiency and allow value to flow freely. And by doing so and reducing these barriers to entry and reducing the cost profile, we can have much broader inclusion in the system, which not only we all can agree in the DeFi world is a net benefit, but I think the centralized the CeFi world would also agree that having more people participate is only beneficial to growing the pie. And so our statement here and what we have been working on and what we are decreeing as FutureFi is when these two worlds coexist, and it won't be a replacement, it'll actually be an enhancement. It'll be a combination of these market infrastructures that drive more efficiency and allow us to create more innovative products and services, and then distribute them through well-known and highly accessible distribution channels. As one example to evoke the imagination, could you imagine if you could go to your existing traditional financial institution today, your bank, your broker-dealer, and say, I'd love to offer my holdings as liquidity to one of these assets that I believe is going to see outsized growth, and then have passive exposure by lending your collateral out at effectively zero cost. Those types of futures we think are infinitely exciting and start to really bring about the true potential of what this infrastructure represents. And so to that end, that's exactly what we have been working on in the infrastructure that we have been facilitating in the conversations that we've been facilitating on Algorand. We've been working with the crypto native people, the people who are best in class in the DeFi space that have built and innovated in a lot of these new protocols that allow this very efficient and streamlined lending, borrowing, trading, etc. But also making sure that our layer one protocol, our primitives, Algorand standards, have the necessary levers in place so that you can have something like a security trade on these rails, so that you can have something like a CBDC issued medium of exchange, be able to settle these transactions, to facilitate cross-border payments, have tax and compliance and reconciliation along the way. And so this convergence here, driven by the standards and driven by the technology that we've really focused on, is the future and the world that Algorand is actively working on building. to just spend another quick moment on the technology, because really it starts with the foundation of our blockchain that really enables this much broader adoption and much broader rollout. As a quick example, we have this concept here at Algorand called Layer 1, where we have, you can think of it as templatized many of the most common actions that occur on a blockchain. To bring that point to life and just give you another quick example, the Algorand standard asset, or the ASA as we call it, is that combination of standards where any developer, whether you're an individual or a large enterprise, can use the ASA to create something on the same look, feel, and properties as something like a Bitcoin, where it has a known minted maximum value. It will never increase beyond that. It can be used peer-to-peer. There are no centralized controls that are governing kind of the flow or the transfer of that asset. But we also appreciate that, wouldn't it be great if you could use your Tesla shares, as somebody referenced earlier in the day, as part of your collateral for your multi-collateral DAI? Or could you use traditional asset classes as collateral in this decentralized world? And so again, using the Algorand standard asset, you can create a security token and have a standard set of controls, like an allow list, deny list, like a clawback mechanism, so that you can undo transfers if those assets wind up in the hands of somebody that isn't entitled to hold them. And so this flexibility allows people to really walk that spectrum of decentralization, and it allows these centralized assets to live in decentralized infrastructure, and it allows decentralized infrastructure to bring all of its benefits to the centralized world. So I hope that was illustrative of how we have been building in from day one the robust, secure, and really approachable implementation that unlocks this FutureFi world. And it's not just us, fortunately. Issuing an asset or launching a protocol does not make a market. And so we've been heads down, really building out the ecosystem of players and what we call, in many cases, the minimum viable ecosystem. And so for those of you that might not be in the weeds every day looking at all the component pieces, you issue an asset, you want that asset to be supported by custodians. You want the exchanges to use and list and trade your asset. You want tax and compliance infrastructure layered on top. And then ultimately, if it's a stable coin or a medium of exchange, you want those assets to be put to work. You want them to be in lending and borrowing pools. You want other assets, such as investments, that exist on that chain. And so this is really what we've been heads down focused on building. And really, in just a short time frame, we've seen a tremendous amount of growth, in no small part to those layer 1 primitives. We aren't rolling out new standards every single time that force the entire ecosystem to innovate or rev their infrastructure. So as an example, if you support the algo today, or if your infrastructure supports the algo, you, by all intents and purposes, also support all future Algorand standard assets, because the code that we used under the hood to create the algo is the same code that somebody like Meld, who has created tokenized gold on Algorand, has used. And so the custodians and exchanges that support us also have the technical capability to support every other asset that's issued on our platform. So this is a concept that typically gets buried in the weeds, but has been a huge aspect of why we've been able to scale and bring our ecosystem and bring that inter-ecosystem interoperability to market so quickly. I believe I saw Thomas on the call earlier today, so I wasn't planning on giving him a shout out, but here he is. So Thomas, thank you very much for working with us and continuing to be a great partner. I love Thomas's quote, so I won't try and put the words in his mouth, but as he said it, Algorand is a game changer for payments. Its transaction costs are in micro pennies, and it cuts their transaction costs as a payment service provider and an e-commerce plugin. And so Thomas has been a great partner of ours and a great example of how, when you have these standards and when you start to have the relevant ecosystem, it really starts to enable the entire network that's built atop Algorand. In much the same vein, great nods from people such like Jeremy Allaire, CEO, chairman of Circle, and the team behind USDC. USDC is natively issued on Algorand, and I believe, as of earlier today, is up over 35 million in terms of minted value on chain. We're pretty excited, and we know we've got a long way to go to kind of tip into the 8 or so billion that USDC is closing in on. So we're very happy about our partnership with many of these companies, and a lot of them have learned and started to appreciate the benefits that this layer one approach and these standards can really bring to helping them scale their businesses. The last few things here on just the continuation of the growth of our ecosystem. Algorand, one of the unique benefits that we didn't talk about is actually its core consensus mechanism. I don't want to get too buried in the weeds here, but really what our engine allows us to do is process over 1,000 transactions per second today. We'll talk a little bit more on the next slide about what those future enhancements look like, but wanted to give everyone a sense for the amount of transactions we see on an aggregate basis, and then the peak transaction processing speed that we've seen just in demand over the last 90 days or so. We're extremely proud. February 26th, as I have highlighted here, we went over 1 million transactions. That's starting to close in. I believe Ethereum had about 1 million, 1.2 million on the exact same day. And so we're extremely happy about just the adoption, the growth, and then the utility. As we all know and have heard over the past several days, the cost of gas is only starting to price more and more use cases out of the Ethereum ecosystem. And fortunately, many of them have found a great home and a great partner in Algorand by being able to migrate and then immediately roll out, because our standards are easy, they're approachable. You don't have to be an expert in some new language that you have to write perfect code in every time. You can think Algorand's protocol as much more like a bunch of function calls that we've stamped out so that you can really focus on your business. So extremely proud of the team. And if you want to follow these metrics with us, you can go to our developer portal and click on the metrics tab as well. And so as we turn the page and look ahead towards this future world of how DeFi and CeFi start to merge and come together, we know that we will only need to continue to enhance our scale and performance. There was originally thought that blockchain networks can never be on par with things like Visa's payment network. We have a roadmap and plan over the course of 21 and 2022 to not just go from our 1,200 or 1,300 TPS today, but 10,000, and then shortly thereafter to 40,000. Our founder, Silvio Macali, has a great post on the technology and how that's being done. And so that's a key part of our development, is ensuring that we can meet the demands of something like a Visa or London Stock Exchange and the throughput that they need to use their assets on this infrastructure. In the same vein, not just being fast, efficient, secure, and cheap, we know that we need flexible deployment models. And so much the same way we've built in the controls at the asset layer, so you can issue something like Bitcoin, or you can issue something like a security. We also know that the infrastructure can typically be regulated and might have specific requirements about being in country or being in a secure or particular data center. And so we're launching a new technology that we call the Algorand co-chain. One of the key benefits here is it's not just a siphoned off or a siloed private permissioned Algorand-based network. It's actually going to retain full interoperability with the public domain. And so to help, again, just envision the future world that we're building here, imagine that you're a bank and all of your different branches live within this private permission network. And so you can do interbank settlement, you can do transfer of collateral, and if you want to, you can start to onboard your other trading counterparties to that private permission network. However, because it's mathematically derived and also fully interoperable with the public domain, we're able to extend the benefit of double spending prevention as a service effectively. And so you can also move assets from your private domain into the public domain, auction it to a much broader set of users if you so wish, most likely get a better price point for it, and then take the proceeds, move it back into your private application, your private network, and continue to move between your banks without disclosing all of that information to potential competitors or to others. And so we think that this co-chain is the foundational next component piece that will prevent things such as multiple siloed private blockchain implementations that are at every single vendor out there today. To go hand in hand with that, we know that it's not just an Algorand world, and we're very excited to announce and discuss the token bridge technology. You can think of the token bridge as aptly named to do exactly as it intends. It is a bridge layer that allows us to provide state synchronization. So we can, Algorand can say exactly what the balance is of all of our users to another blockchain such as Ethereum. And so long as Ethereum is able to reciprocate and provide the state synchronization back and attest that, yes, these assets are locked in this particular wallet and they want to engage in an exchange, we can now facilitate that handshake between Algorand and between Ethereum. And then as we continue to build out those adapters to every other public network that's out there. So we're pretty excited about not only bridging the world to the rest of the DeFi ecosystem and starting to create this interconnective mesh, this interconnective framework for all of the new layer ones, but also start to make the enterprise and make these private institutions much more comfortable and have a pathway in order to scale with the rest of this ecosystem. So if there's anything that piqued your interest, we invite you to come talk to us. We've got accelerators, grant programs, incubators. We have an ecosystem of VCs that invest in companies that build on top of us. If you're a developer and just want to learn more, please check out our developer portal. And if you're an enterprise, I will drop my contact information in the chat here, and be happy to take any questions you have now and continue that either over email, Discord, or otherwise. So thanks so much.
Hey, David, I do have a question, and then we do have a couple of questions coming in. Do you have a wrapped algo token that can trade on Ethereum? Is that available yet, or?
Yeah. So great question. Without getting too under or into the technical nuance here, there's basically two ways that you can facilitate that. One is through a centralized party. So think, Wrapped Bitcoin as an example. We do have a couple of partners that are working on that. Stay tuned, and there's more to come. The name of the entity, what we will promote on our website, and we'll take you through how to gain access to it. But yes, Wrapped Algo is coming to Ethereum, to the chain near you. And then the other side of that would be decentralized. And so I mentioned the token bridge. That foundational technology is being built right now with a few select partners. And we should have a bridge to Ethereum announcement, in the not too distant future. So the answer is yes. If you want a decentralized wrap algo, you'll be able to have that. If you want a centralized, so through a centralized entity version of wrapped algo, we'll be able to facilitate that as well.
Fantastic. So we have two questions. One is from Pranay from Princeton University. Is Clarity language fully formally verifiable? If yes, how does it impact the expressiveness of the language?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, you're testing the depths of my technical knowledge. I can say that it is deterministic, and so I am not as well versed in how it impacts the expressiveness. But if you'd like, I can put you in contact with the team here, the research team and the engineering team that are leading the initiatives, and would be more than happy to dig into all the nuance.
Okay. Next question is from Michael. How do you define a transaction? And this is referring to your slide where you were showing the TPS rates when comparing to Ethereum. So like a transaction in Ethereum versus a transaction on Algorand, is it the same thing? Is it defined differently? Is it more than sending algo between exchanges and wallets?
Yeah. So the benefit of having a layer one approach like we have is that basically all transactions look and feel the same. And so if you want to create an asset, it's a basic send transaction of the parameters you want to the network, and then the network actually mints that on your behalf. If you want to send and receive algos, it's a send transaction to the network, and it sends algos. And so by having collapsed a lot of the complexity, by removing a lot of kind of the open-ended compute that you would find on Ethereum, we're able to have the exact same outcome at effectively a fraction of the cost and in much faster execution times. And so we don't have to wait for looping to complete. We don't have to wait for the layer two logic to execute. Basically, you submit your transaction so long as it's approved and meets the criteria that you can specify in our layer one smart contract language, it will process. So it is more, it's the creation of assets, it's the sending, receiving, it's the execution of lending and borrowing. It's the entire DeFi stack, but also deterministically final in about 4 seconds. And so there is nuance there, but I'm again happy to take that offline as well.
Okay, fantastic. If anybody else has any questions, please pop it in. David, I think we're running out of time. I think we're gonna wrap up here, and we've got actually Barry jumping on a panel. We want to get that started next. So thank you so much for the presentation. Very interesting content. You might want to drop your contact information in the chat here on the chat box. David, please, if you can do that. Again, thank you so much for your talk and your time.
Happy to do so. Thanks, Jamil, for pulling this together, and thank you all for listening in.